The planet Valthar was ancient, forgotten by most, but it held secrets that no one dared to uncover. The people of the galaxy whispered about a powerful weapon hidden in the deepest part of the planet. It was a sword, older than any civilization. A sword so powerful that it was said to give its wielder the strength to rule the galaxy. But it was not a weapon that could be claimed easily for centuries. Many had tried to find it, to touch it, to wield its mighty power. Explorers, treasure hunters, and even armies had come and gone. Some believed the sword was a myth, a story to scare children. But the truth was far different. It was real, and it lay waiting, untouched, hidden from those who sought it. The legends spoke of a curse. No one could lift the sword unless they were the chosen one. And for centuries, no one had been chosen. Valthar's surface was harsh and unforgiving. The atmosphere was thick with a toxic fog, and the landscape was covered in jagged rocks and vast deserts. It was a place that no one wanted to visit, a place that seemed to reject all life. Yet, deep within its heart, in a forgotten temple, the sword rested on a pedestal. The sword's blade glowed faintly, its surface smooth and cold to the touch. Waiting for the right person, Jack was no hero. Nor was he a treasure hunter. He was an adventurer, a man with a thirst for the unknown, always searching for the next thrill. He had heard the rumors about the sword, but to him, they were just stories, nothing more than fancy tales to excite the imagination. But his curiosity had always pushed him to places others dared not go. And so, Jack found himself on Valthar, seeking the sword, not because he believed in its legend, but because he believed in the excitement of discovery. He landed his ship on the edge of a vast, lifeless desert, the wind howling as if warning him to turn back. But Jack had already made up his mind. The thrill of the hunt, the promise of finding something no one else had, was too strong. He carried only a basic set of supplies: food, water, and his blaster for protection. He didn't expect much, just a few hours of exploration before heading home. But the story spoke of an ancient temple hidden deep in the desert. If the stories were true, the sword would be there. The heat from the twin suns beat down on him as Jack trudged through the endless sand dunes. He had no guide, no map, just the faint whispers of a long-lost legend. But he was determined to find it. The temple, if it existed, would be buried beneath the sands. His instincts told him he was close. He could feel the pull, a strange sensation in the air, like a magnetic force drawing him forward. After hours of walking, Jack spotted something in the distance. It was small at first, barely visible against the horizon. But as he got closer, it became clear. The ruins of a temple lay in front of him, its once grand structure now crumbling with age. The stones were covered in strange symbols, alien in design. The architecture was nothing like anything Jack had ever seen before. This was no ordinary temple. He walked cautiously toward the entrance, his footsteps echoing in the silent desert. The air was thick with tension, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. He paused for a moment, looking around. There was no one, no signs of life, only the ruins and the wind. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior was dark, the walls covered in dust and cobwebs. But Jack could feel something alive, something powerful. As he ventured deeper into the temple, he came to a large chamber. In the center, on a raised pedestal, lay the sword. Its blade shimmered faintly, the only light in the otherwise dark room. It was beautiful, with a design unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The hilt was carved from a material that seemed to glow with a soft inner light. The sword was long, sleek, and ominous. Jack's heart raced. This was it. This was the sword that had been waiting for centuries. He approached the pedestal slowly, his eyes locked on the weapon. The legends were true. The sword had been waiting for someone. But who? Could he be the one? Jack's hand trembled as he reached out, not knowing what would happen next. He had heard the stories. They said no one could lift the sword unless they were the chosen one. But Jack wasn't the chosen one, was he? He was just a man, an adventurer. He didn't believe in destiny, and he didn't believe in curses. But something inside him, something deep and ancient, told him that this moment was more than just chance. This was his moment. With a swift motion, Jack grabbed the hilt of the sword. The instant his fingers touched the cool surface, a shock of energy surged through him. It was like nothing he had ever felt before. The room seemed to spin, the air around him crackling with power. Jack staggered back, gripping the sword tightly. He felt the weight of it, both the physical weight and something far heavier. Something that seemed to connect him to the very heart of the galaxy. And then, as quickly as it had come, the energy faded. The room was still. Jack stood there, holding the sword, his mind racing. What had just happened? He had touched the sword, but he hadn't felt like he had chosen it. No, the sword had chosen him. The legends had been true. But what did this mean for Jack? And what did it mean for the galaxy? The sword was no longer just a myth. It was real, and it had chosen Jack. But as he stood there, holding the blade, he felt something stir inside him, a strange, powerful energy that he couldn't explain. The room around him felt alive, as if the very walls were breathing, whispering in a language he couldn't understand. The sword's glow intensified, casting eerie shadows on the ancient stones. Jack's fingers tingled as they wrapped around the hilt. A voice, soft but clear, echoed in his mind. It was a whisper at first, like the wind brushing against his ear. But it soon grew louder. "Come closer, chosen one. You have touched what none other could." Jack flinched, shaking his head. He knew. It wasn't real. He couldn't hear voices. But the voice didn't stop. It pulsed through his thoughts, calling him, urging him to listen. "Awaken," it said again. Stronger now, and the sword hummed in his grip. The sound was low, almost like a distant thunderstorm, but it felt alive in a way that made Jack's heart race. He wasn't imagining it. The sword was speaking to him. Fear gripped him. He had come to Valthar for adventure, for the thrill of discovery. But now, standing in this forgotten temple, holding the sword, he realized that this was no ordinary treasure hunt. He wasn't just in search of a weapon. The sword had chosen him for something bigger, something far more dangerous. Jack's breath quickened, his mind spinning. He wanted to let go, to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The sword seemed to pull him, and it wasn't just the weight of the metal lid, it was something far deeper. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that the sword had awakened something in him. "Who are you?" Jack whispered, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The voice in his head seemed to pause, as if considering his question. Then, slowly, it answered. "I am the guardian of forgotten power," it said. "I was forged by an ancient civilization, a race lost to time. For centuries I have waited, but no one has been worthy until now." Jack's mind raced. An ancient civilization. A race lost to time. He wasn't prepared for this, for anything like this. He had expected to find treasure, maybe make a little name for himself as a legendary explorer. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He took a step back, but his feet felt heavy, as if the ground itself was holding him in place. The voice continued, its tone calm yet filled with an undeniable authority. "You, Jack, are not just an adventurer. You are the heir to a forgotten bloodline, a line that was once bound to the power of this sword. For generations it has remained hidden, waiting for you to awaken its true potential." Jack shook his head, disbelief clouding his thoughts. He was just a man from a small colony on Earth. No royal bloodline, no ancient heritage. He was nobody. He had no idea how this sword had found him. But he knew one thing. It wasn't just calling to him. As Jack's fingers tightened around the hilt, he felt a surge of energy flow through him. His vision blurred, and for a brief moment, he saw flashes of distant stars, vast cities, and alien beings that he couldn't recognize. The images were gone as quickly as they had come, but the feeling lingered. He wasn't just holding a sword. He was connected to something vast, something ancient. The sword was more than just a weapon. It was a key to something hidden, something powerful. And Jack had no idea what he had just unlocked. The ground beneath him trembled. The walls of the temple seemed to shudder as if they, too, were awakening to the power Jack now held. The voice in his mind grew louder, more insistent. "Embrace your destiny, Jack. The galaxy awaits." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know if he was ready for this. He had never believed in destiny or fate. He had always believed in the here and now, in the things he could see and touch. But as the sword pulsed in his hand, as the whispers grew louder, he knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed forever. He wasn't just an adventurer anymore. He was the chosen one, and now the galaxy would know his name. Jack's heart still raced as he stood there, gripping the sword, the strange whispers echoing in his mind. The temple had grown quiet, unnaturally so. It was as if the world around him had paused, holding its breath. He could still feel the energy of the sword pulsing through him. But something else was now in the air, a tension that he couldn't explain. Suddenly, a low hum filled the room. At first, Jack thought it was the sword itself, but the sound grew louder, vibrating through the stone walls. It wasn't just in his head anymore. The noise seemed to be coming from everywhere. Before Jack could react, figures appeared in the doorway, moving in near silence. They were tall, humanoid, but their features were unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Their skin shimmered like liquid metal, glowing faintly in the dim light of the chamber. Their eyes were dark, almost like endless voids, and their bodies were adorned with intricate armor that seemed to pulse with its own energy. Jack's grip on the sword tightened. The Guardians, the legends had spoken of them, ancient protectors who had watched over the sword for centuries. But Jack had never imagined they would appear so suddenly, or with such presence. The Guardians moved as one, their movements synchronized, graceful yet intimidating. They didn't speak, but their presence was enough to send a chill down Jack's spine. One of them, slightly taller than the others, stepped forward. Its eyes locked onto Jack's, and in that moment, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of judgment. This being wasn't just looking at him, it was weighing him, measuring whether he was worthy of what he had just taken. "You are not of our kind." The Guardian's voice echoed in Jack's mind, deep and commanding. "You have taken what does not belong to you." Jack swallowed hard, struggling to maintain his composure. The voice wasn't coming from the Guardians mouth, it was in his mind. It was as if the words were being forced into his thoughts, making it impossible to ignore. "I didn't mean to," Jack started, but the Guardian cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You have taken it, and now you will face the consequences." The air around them crackled, and the temperature seemed to drop, as if the room itself was preparing for something. The other Guardians began to move, surrounding Jack, their eyes never leaving him. Jack's hand shook, but he couldn't let go of the sword. He wasn't sure why, but he felt an unspoken connection to it, like it was a part of him now. The tall Guardian raised its arm, and suddenly, the sword in Jack's hands called out, vibrating in a way it never had before. The voice in Jack's mind grew louder, and this time was not just words, it was a flood of images of ancient civilizations, of stars burning out and worlds colliding. It was overwhelming. "You are not the first to come," the guardian said. Its tone colder now. "Many have tried to lift the sword. None have succeeded. Until you. But you are not ready, human. The sword chooses, but it is not just a weapon. It is a test. And you have failed." Jack felt a surge of panic, but he wasn't sure what to do. The guardians were closing in on him, their hands outstretched as though preparing to strike. And yet, the sword in his hands began to hum again, louder this time. It wasn't just a simple vibration, it was a force, a pulse that Jack could feel deep in his chest. No. The voice in his mind said, calm and strong now. "You have passed the first test." Jack's confusion only deepened. Was the sword speaking to him, or was it some part of his mind? He didn't know anymore. But before he could question it further, the guardian stopped moving, as if frozen in place. The tall guardian's face, if it could be called that, showed no emotion, but the air felt different, less hostile. "You are chosen," the guardian said, lowering its arm. "But chosen for what, we cannot say. The sword has bound you to its will. You may not leave until you have learned what that means." Jack was left standing in the center of the chamber, the sword glowing in his hands. The guardians still watched him, their presence intimidating, yet strangely passive now. The weight of their gaze felt like it could crush him, but he didn't move. He couldn't. The tall guardian stepped back, and the others followed, disappearing, as silently as they had appeared. The room seemed to settle again, the hum fading. Jack was alone once more, alone with the sword, and the burden it now placed on him. But even as the guardians vanished, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The sword had chosen him, yes, but there was so much more to this story than he could possibly understand. The sword, the guardians, the ancient bloodline, was all part of something bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And no matter how much he wanted to walk away, he knew there was no turning back now. The air was thick with the aftermath of the guardian's departure. Jack stood alone, his chest heaving as he tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. The sword in his hands was warm now, almost alive. It hummed with power, its energy pulsing through him like a storm trapped inside his body. He glanced around the temple, trying to find his bearings. The guardians had vanished, leaving him with nothing but the sword, and the unsettling feeling that he had just stepped into something far bigger than he could understand. Jack's grip tightened on the hilt. The sword had been waiting for someone, and that someone was him. But what did that mean? What was the sword? And why had it chosen him, a mere human, over all the other beings that had come before him? As his mind raced, the sword suddenly shifted. In his hand, responding to his growing confusion, it pulsed once, then twice, louder now, with a strength that shook him to his core. Jack's entire body was filled with an overwhelming surge of energy, and the temple walls seemed to tremble in response. It wasn't just the sword's power. It was his power. Without warning, Jack's vision blurred. The room around him disappeared, replaced by a dizzying swirl of colors and lights. He saw flashes of things he couldn't understand. Alien cities, battles in space, worlds burning, ancient creatures with eyes that glowed like stars. Each image flashed in his mind with intense speed, too quick for him to grasp fully, yet powerful enough to leave a mark. His heart raced, and a sharp pain shot through his head as the images grew more intense. The sword was not just a weapon. It was unlocking something deep inside him. The power surged through him like fire, and Jack couldn't contain it. His body arced forward, the sword's blade crackling with energy as it vibrated violently in his grip. He felt himself being pulled toward the center of the chamber, unable to stop himself. It was as if the sword had taken control, guiding him, forcing him to do its will. Jack's mind screamed to let go, but his body betrayed him. He couldn't. The ground beneath him split open, the stone cracking with an explosive force, sending debris flying into the air. Jack had no control. He was nothing but a vessel for the sword's power. His eyes widened in shock as the floor beneath him continued to fracture. The force of the energy radiating out in waves. But even through the chaos, he heard the voice again, clearer this time. Stronger. Embrace it, it whispered. But this time, it wasn't just the sword speaking. It was something else. Something older, deeper, and far more powerful. Jack's body trembled as the sword flared brighter, and he felt a new sensation, the feeling of power coursing through his veins. It was intoxicating. He could feel the sword's energy running through his muscles, his blood, his very bones. He was no longer just human. He was something more. Without thinking, Jack swung the sword. The motion was effortless, and as the blade cut through the air, a shockwave exploded from its edge. The temple walls shook, cracks spreading in every direction, dust falling from the ceiling like a rain of ash. The power was too much to contain, and the sword's call was too strong to resist. For a moment, everything went still. The dust hung in the air, and the room was eerily quiet. Jack looked down at the sword in his hands, and for the first time, he saw the blade as something more than just an object. It was an extension of him, a part of his very being. It was as if it had always been there, waiting for him to awaken. But even as Jack tried to process what had just happened, something shifted within him. The energy had settled, but the feeling of power remained, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. He felt different, now stronger, sharper, and yet more distant from the world around him. The sword's power had given him a glimpse into something far beyond anything he had ever known. But at what cost? He stumbled back, trying to regain control of his breath. The sword pulsed once more, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the same hum of energy, it was a call, a beckoning, urging him forward. It wanted him to take another step, to wield its power again. But Jack wasn't sure if he was ready. As the dust settled around him, Jack realized one thing. This was only the beginning. The sword had shown him its power, but it had also shown him something darker, something he could not yet understand. The guardians had warned him. They had said he wasn't ready. And now, as the power of the sword coursed through him, Jack couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Jack's hands shook as he stood amidst the shattered stone and swirling dust. The sword's power still throbbed in his chest, a constant, pulsing reminder of what he had become. But the surge of energy that had overtaken him had left a lingering question. What was this sword really, and why had it chosen him? He looked around the ruined temple, the air still thick with the aftermath of the sword's unleashed power. The walls were cracked, the ancient carvings barely visible under layers of debris. But there, deep in the heart of the temple, something caught Jack's eye. A faint light glimmered beneath a pile of rubble. Curiosity, driven by the lingering pull of the sword, urged him forward. Without fully understanding why, Jack moved toward it, his footsteps echoing in the silence. With a burst of effort, he cleared the debris, revealing an ancient stone tablet. It was covered in strange symbols, symbols Jack had never seen before. But they seemed oddly familiar. As his hand hovered over the surface, the sword in his grip pulsed again, as if guiding him, as if urging him to understand. Jack placed his palm against the stone, and instantly, the tablet flared with a brilliant light. The ground beneath him trembled, and his mind was flooded with images of an ancient race, long lost to the galaxy. The memories were fragmented, but they came fast, and they came with overwhelming force. The alien civilization had once thrived a great and powerful empire that spanned entire star systems. They had discovered the sword, its power, and its true purpose. The sword wasn't just a weapon, but a key, a gateway to an unimaginable force, a power that could alter the very fabric of the universe itself. But with that power came a curse. The civilization had used the sword, as Jack was now doing, and in doing so, they had brought about their own downfall. The sword had been forged to protect, but it had also been created to destroy. It had consumed them all, draining their energy, turning their once great empire to dust. The guardians, those who had appeared before him, were not merely protectors. They were the last remnants of that ancient race, bound to the sword, cursed to protect it and ensure no one else could wield its power. And now Jack had unknowingly awakened it once more. The images flashed faster, and Jack staggered, his head throbbing with the weight of what he was seeing. He understood now. The sword wasn't just a symbol of power. It was a symbol of destruction, a weapon forged not for battle, but for something far darker. The ancient race had believed it could control the sword's power, but in the end, the sword had controlled them. Jack gasped for breath, trying to steady himself. The tablet was fading, the light dimming as the memories subsided. But one final image lingered in his mind, a face, a figure, someone who looked like him. But it wasn't just a likeness. The figure was his ancestor, a human who had once wielded the sword in a time long past. Jack's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, the sword still clutched tightly in his hand. The weight of what he had learned crushed him. The sword had chosen him not because he was strong or worthy, but because he was tied to it. He was part of a bloodline, one that had once wielded the sword. And now that bloodline had returned. The sword's power surged again, but this time Jack fought it. He could feel it, this insidious pull, urging him to take control, to use the power for his own gain. But the memories of the ancient race, of their fall, haunted him. The sword was not just a weapon. It was a test, a curse, and Jack had to decide whether he would succumb to it, or whether he would destroy it before it could consume him too. As the room settled back into silence, Jack's breath came in short gasps. He had always believed that adventure was about finding treasure, about discovering new worlds, but this was no treasure. This was a curse, a dangerous legacy that Jack wasn't sure he could escape. He had the power, but he didn't know what it would cost him. The sword was in his hands. But its true power, the true cost, had only just begun to reveal itself. The temple was quiet now. But Jack's mind was anything but. The weight of the sword in his hands felt heavier than ever. His thoughts churned, trying to process what he had just learned. The sword was not a gift, was a test, a curse, and he was the one who had to carry it. But the question lingered. Could he resist its power, or would he be consumed by it like the ancient race before him? The guardians had warned him. They had told him he was not ready, and he now understood why. The sword wasn't just about wielding power. It was about controlling the very forces of the universe. A power so great that it had destroyed those who tried to master it before him. And now, Jack was caught in the same dangerous web. But even as his mind screamed for him to let go, to destroy the sword, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he needed it. He had never known power like this before. It was intoxicating. The sword had connected him to something ancient, something real. In those moments when the sword's energy surged through him, he felt alive, unstoppable. The rush of power made him wonder what else he could do with it. His mind raced with possibilities, galaxies to conquer, enemies to defeat, worlds to reshape. The sword had chosen him for a reason. Maybe he wasn't meant to fight against it. Maybe he was meant to control it. After all, The ancient race had failed because they had sought to control the sword's power without understanding it. But Jack was different. He could understand it. He had the strength. His hand trembled as he gripped the sword tighter. But then a voice broke through his thoughts. Voice that he hadn't heard in what felt like ages. You still don't understand. Do you? Jack whipped around, his pulse quickening. The voice wasn't his own, nor was it the sword's. It was something else, someone else. A figure emerged from the shadows of the temple, a woman, cloaked in flowing robes, her face obscured by a hood. She moved with the grace of someone who had lived 1,000 lifetimes. And her presence felt ... ancient. Powerful. I am Laia, the woman said, her voice soft yet filled with a presence that made the very air tremble. And I've been waiting. For you? Jack took a step back, his hand instinctively moving to the sword, the only source of power he could trust now. Who are you? What do you want? Laia's lips curved into a faint smile, her eyes shining with an intelligence that sent a shiver down Jack's spine. What I want, Jack, is for you to stop running from the truth. Jack's brow furrowed. What truth? I don't know what you're talking about. Ah, Laia sighed. You still believe you have a choice, don't you? The sword chose you, but you are not the first. You are not the first human to be chosen, and you will not be the last. This power, this curse, it runs through your bloodline. Your ancestors sought to wield it, but their ambition destroyed them. Now, it's your turn. The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. His bloodline, his ancestors, Dee had thought. The sword was his chance to prove himself, to rise above the mundane life he had once known. But now he saw the terrifying truth. The sword had chosen him not for his strength, but because of what he was, a link to the past, to the failures of those who had come before him. Do you think you are different? Laia asked, her voice growing harder. You think you can control it? You think you can survive where they failed? You have no idea what you're dealing with. Jack's mind spun. Us. The voice in his head, the whispers of the sword, grew louder, urging him to take control, to harness the power for himself. But Laia's words echoed in his mind, and he couldn't ignore the doubt creeping into his heart. Why are you telling me this? Jack demanded, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. What do you want from me? Laia's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she looked almost ... pitying. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what's at stake. The sword isn't just a weapon. It's a gateway, Jack. A doorway to something far greater. And the moment you give in to its power, you will unleash a storm that no one can control. A storm. Jack's pulse quickened. The thought of the power within him, unleashed upon the galaxy, was too much to ignore. Could he truly control it? Or would he, too, be consumed by it, like the civilization before him? The Guardians had warned him, and now Laia was giving him the same caution. But there was a deeper question forming in his mind. I don't want to destroy it, Jack said slowly, his voice filled with uncertainty. I want to control it. I want to be the one to wield its power. Laia's gaze hardened. Then you are already lost. Control is an illusion, Jack. The sword is not something you wield. It is something that wields you. And when it is done, with you, you will be nothing but dust, just like the rest of them. Jack stood there, the weight of the sword pulling him toward an uncertain fate. His grip tightened, but his heart clenched. The power of the sword, the temptation to wield it to reshape the galaxy, was becoming too strong to resist. But deep down, he could feel it. The storm that Laia spoke of, brewing just beneath the surface. Jack was at a crossroads. The pursuit of power was his to take, but at what cost? The question that haunted him now was simple. Could he control the sword? Or would the sword control him? The weight of the sword in Jack's hands was unbearable. It felt like the very air around him was heavy with its power, pressing down on him, forcing him to make a choice. He could feel it in his veins, the burning pull of the energy surging. Through him, a force so ancient and vast that it seemed to stretch beyond the stars. But as he stood in the ruins of the temple, Laia's words echoed in his mind, the warning of a fate he wasn't sure he could escape. The sword wields you, not the other way around. Every instinct screamed at him to drop it, to run, to find a way to free himself from this ancient curse. But at the same time, the power within the sword called to him, whispered to him in a language older than time, promising him everything he had ever dreamed of: control, power, the ability to reshape the universe itself. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He could hear his own breath in the silence of the temple, the crackling of the sword's energy, the pulse of the universe itself in his hands. The weight of his destiny, of his bloodline, pressed on him like 1,000 tons of stone. You don't have to do this. Laia's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood at the entrance of the chamber, her eyes fixed on him, filled with a mix of pity and regret. You don't have to follow the path of those before you. Jack turned to face her, his grip tightening around the hilt of the sword. The pull of the power was almost too much to resist. It felt right, like it had always been meant for him, but at what cost? Tell me, Jack said, his voice hoarse. What happens if I destroy it? What happens if I walk away? Leah's face grew pale, and she hesitated. The silence between them was thick, like an invisible force keeping the words at bay. Then, finally, she spoke. Destroying it would mean the end of its power. You would be free, but so would the galaxy. There would be no more controlling the tides of fate, no more bending the stars to your will. But that freedom comes with its own price. There will always be those who seek power, and without the sword, they will find other ways to obtain it. Jack's mind reeled. Was it even possible to destroy the sword? Would he be able to sever the connection that had bound him to this ancient force, or was he forever entwined with it? Laia stepped forward, her eyes searching his face. The sword is a part of you now. It's not just a weapon, it's your legacy. And no matter how hard you try, you can't outrun it. But you can choose what you do with it. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the power thrumming beneath his skin. His fingers ached from holding the hilt, and his thoughts swirled with the weight of it all. The sword had promised him everything: the chance to rule, to control, to reshape the universe. And yet, in the back of his mind, a part of him knew that this wasn't the answer. The sword's power was a poison, one that could not be contained forever. He thought back to the ancient race, to the guardians who had warned him. They had failed because they had wanted to control it. And now, here he was, standing on the precipice of the same decision. Would he choose to control the sword, to wield its power, and risk becoming like those who had come before him? Or would he choose to destroy it, knowing that it would change everything, but that freedom would come at a cost? The decision was his, and it had to be made now. Jack took a deep breath, his fingers loosening around the hilt of the sword. He could feel the sword's pull, its desire to stay in his grasp, to claim him. But he pushed it away, deeper into his soul, letting the choice rise to the surface. I can't do this, Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. I can't let it control me. He took a final, decisive step toward the center of the temple, and with one powerful swing, he plunged the sword into the stone floor. The sword screamed in his mind, a burst of energy so intense that it threatened to shatter him. But Jack stood firm, his heart racing, his body trembling. The energy surged through him, but he didn't flinch. I choose freedom, Jack said. his voice steady despite the overwhelming power swirling around him. "I choose to destroy this curse." The sword's energy flared one final time, and for a moment, Jack thought he would be consumed by it. But then, slowly, the light faded. The sword's pulse grew weaker, and the connection he had felt to it began to unravel. The power that had once surged through him now felt like a distant echo. Fading into nothingness, the temple was silent once again. Jack stood over the sword, now embedded in the stone. It was no longer glowing, no longer alive. The connection was broken, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack was free.